Marin Cole had promised herself two things before walking into the Ashford Hotel ballroom that Saturday night. 1, she would smile through the whole party. 2, she would not let anyone see that her feet already hurt in these borrowed heels. She kept the first promise for exactly 11 minutes. The engagement party belonged to her friend Priya, and it glittered the way downtown Chicago parties always did. Gold light, tall glasses, a string quartet in the corner playing something soft. Marin smoothed the deep green fabric over her hips and reminded herself that she belonged here. She had helped plan half of it. The seating, the flowers, the little cards on every table. This was her world. She was good at it. Then she heard the laugh. She knew that laugh the way you know a song you wish you could forget. Low, easy, always a little too pleased with itself. She turned before she could stop herself, and there he was. Gavin. He looked exactly the same. Same expensive watch, same practiced smile. On his arm was a thin woman in silver who looked bored already. Gavin's eyes found Marin across the room, and something sharpened in his face. He said something to the woman, then started walking straight toward her. "Marin," he said, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "Wow, you came to a party like this? Good for you. Really?" He looked her up and down slowly. "You look comfortable. That's nice. Not everyone can pull off comfortable in a room like this." The woman in silver laughed into her drink. Marin felt her cheeks go hot. She opened her mouth, but nothing clever came out. It never did in the moment. The clever things always arrived at 2 in the morning, when there was no one left to say them to. "This is Sasha," Gavin went on, tugging the woman forward. "We just got back from Italy. First class the whole way. She hates flying otherwise." He smiled at Marin. "Remember how you always wanted to go to Italy? Funny how things work out." A small crowd had drifted close enough to hear. Marin saw 2 of Priya's cousins watching, whispering. Her throat felt tight. She could feel the whole night about to become a story people would tell later. The girl Gavin dumped, cornered at a party. No comeback. Just standing there. She needed to move. She needed to be anywhere but under his eyes. She turned, quickly, and nearly walked into a wall of a man standing near the ballroom entrance. He was tall, really tall, so that she had to tip her head back. Dark suit, no tie, the top button open like he refused to be uncomfortable for anyone. He was maybe 28, with a strong jaw and calm gray eyes that were already looking down at her, as if he had been watching this whole thing unfold and simply waiting. Later she would not be able to explain what made her do it. Maybe it was the way he stood so still while the rest of the room buzzed. Maybe it was that his eyes held no pity, which was the one thing she could not have handled right then. She stepped close, put her hand lightly on his arm, and whispered, "Could you dance with me? My ex is watching." For one long second, the man said nothing. Marin's heart dropped. She had just asked a total stranger to save her, and he was going to say no, and this would be even worse than before. Then he smiled, just slightly, at one corner of his mouth. "Of course," he said. His voice was quiet and even. "Try to look like you're having a wonderful time. He'll hate that most." He offered his hand. She took it. His grip was warm and sure, and he led her out onto the floor as the quartet slid into a slower song. He moved like he had done this 1,000 times, one hand settling at the small of her back, guiding her without pushing. Marin wasn't a natural dancer, but somehow with him it didn't matter. He made the space small and simple, just the 2 of them turning slowly under the gold light. "Breathe," he murmured. "You're holding your breath." She let out a shaky laugh. "Sorry, I don't usually grab strangers. I'd never have guessed." She smiled despite herself. Over his shoulder, she caught Gavin's face. He had stopped mid-sentence. He was staring at them, at her, his easy smile gone. The woman in silver was tugging his sleeve, but Gavin wasn't listening. He looked, for the first time in the years Marin had known him, completely thrown. "He's watching," Marin whispered. "I know," the stranger said. "Don't look at him. Look at me. It bothers men like that far more." So she looked at him. And that was when the first strange thing happened. A waiter passed close with a tray, paused, and gave the man a small, respectful nod. "Good evening, sir," he said quietly, and moved on. A moment later, one of the hotel's floor managers, a woman Marin had spent all week emailing about table linens, a woman who had barely learned Marin's name, caught sight of her dance partner and actually straightened her posture. She didn't approach. She just watched him with a careful, alert attention, the way people watch someone important to make sure everything is going right. Marin blinked. "Do you work here? No? Then why does everyone—" "My name's Rhett," he said, gently steering the question away. "Rhett Donovan. And you are?" "Marin." She glanced around again. Near the entrance, two men in dark suits had appeared. They weren't dancing. They weren't drinking. They stood with their hands folded, eyes moving slowly across the room, and every so often their gaze returned to Rhett like a needle to north. A small, cold thread of curiosity worked its way up her spine. "Rhett," she said slowly, "why are those men by the door watching you?" His hand stayed steady on her back. The song turned, and for just a moment, something flickered behind those calm gray eyes. Something she couldn't read at all. "Let's finish the dance first," he said softly. "You're doing beautifully. And your ex looks like he's about to swallow his own drink." Marin laughed for real this time. She had no idea she had just placed her hand in the most dangerous man in Chicago. The song ended, but Rhett didn't let go of her hand right away. "One more," he said. "If you drop me now, your ex wins." Marin huffed a laugh. "You're using my own trick against me. I'm improving it." So they danced again. And this time, freed from the panic of the first song, she started to actually see the room around them, and the more she saw, the less sense it made. A man in a gray suit crossed the floor with 2 glasses of wine, clearly heading for his table. When he passed near Rhett, he slowed, gave a short nod and murmured, "Mr. Donovan." Then he kept walking, a little faster than before, as if he'd remembered somewhere else to be. Marin watched him go. "That man just called you Mr. Donovan, like he owed you money. He doesn't owe me money. That's not a no about the rest." Rhett's mouth curved. He turned her gently, and over his shoulder, she caught the hotel's event director, a tense, important woman named Delphine, who had made 3 interns cry that week, standing at the edge of the room. Delphine was not looking at the flowers she had obsessed over. She was looking at Rhett, and she looked nervous. "I've spent all week begging that woman to answer emails," Marin said quietly. "She never once smiled at me. Now she's staring at you like the building's on fire." "Delphine worries a lot," Rhett said. "It's part of her charm. You know her name." "I know a lot of names." Marin pulled back just enough to study his face. He met her look calmly, giving her nothing, and somehow that steadiness only made her more curious. He wasn't showing off. He wasn't dropping hints to impress her. If anything, he seemed to want the attention to slide off him and disappear. "You keep changing the subject," she said. "I keep the subject on you. There's a difference." He tilted his head. "You planned part of this party, didn't you? I can tell. You keep glancing at the table settings, like a parent checking on a sleeping kid." Heat crept up her neck, but it was the good kind this time. "The seating chart, mostly, and the cards, and I fought for those little gold candles instead of the plain ones. The candles were the right call." "You noticed the candles?" "I notice most things." He said it lightly, but something in it sat heavier than the words. She laughed again, and it surprised her how easy it had become. 20 minutes ago she'd wanted to sink through the floor. Now her shoulders had dropped from around her ears, and the burning in her cheeks had cooled to something warm and pleasant. Rhett had a way of talking that made the rest of the room feel far away, like he'd pulled a soft curtain around just the two of them. That was when Gavin decided to try again. She felt him before she saw him, that old awareness of where he was in a room, a habit she hated. He came up beside them at the edge of the dance floor, Sasha nowhere in sight, his smile stapled back into place. "Marin," he said, "introduce me to your friend." Rhett didn't stop moving right away. He finished the turn, brought Marin to a graceful stop, and only then looked at Gavin. An unhurried, patient look, the way you might glance at a phone that had buzzed with nothing important. "Gavin, right?" Rhett said. "Marin mentioned you." Gavin's smile twitched. "Good things, I hope. She's too polite for that." For a second, Gavin didn't know what to do with his face. He recovered and stuck out his hand. "Gavin Reyes. I handle acquisitions over at Whitmore Capital. Maybe you've heard of us." Rhett looked at the offered hand. He didn't take it. He didn't make a show of not taking it either. He simply let the moment pass, as though he hadn't quite noticed, and that was somehow worse for Gavin than a slap. "Whitmore," Rhett said thoughtfully. "They lease 3 floors in the Marchetti building on Wacker, don't they?" Gavin blinked. Yes. How did you? Good building. The management's careful about who they keep." Rhett's voice stayed pleasant, but Gavin's hand slowly dropped back to his side. "I'd hold on to that lease if I were you. Spaces like that don't come around often." It was the calmest thing in the world to say. And yet Gavin had gone slightly pale, as if he'd just been handed a warning he couldn't quite decode. Marin watched him try to find footing, and fail. "Right," Gavin said. "Well, Marin, we should catch up sometime. For old times." "We really shouldn't," Marin said, and the words came out clear and easy, the way they never did at 2 a.m. This time they arrived right on schedule. Gavin's jaw tightened. He looked from her to Rhett, sensed he was losing something he didn't understand, and retreated toward the bar with what was left of his dignity. Marin let out a long breath. "I have wanted to say that for a year. It landed well, only because you softened him up first." She narrowed her eyes. "What did you do to him? He turned white when you mentioned that building." Rhett guided her off the floor toward the quieter edge of the room, one hand light at her elbow. "I told him to keep his office. That's all." "That is not all." "It's what I said." Near the coat check, one of the dark-suited men from earlier appeared without a sound. He didn't speak to Rhett. He only met his eyes, gave the smallest nod, and glanced toward the exit. A silent question. Rhett returned an equally small shake of his head. "Not yet." The man stepped back into the shadows near the door. Marin saw all of it. "Okay," she said. "I'm not imagining this. The staff, that woman, now, them." She nodded toward the coat check. "People don't act like this around a man who owns a normal company." "I never said my company was normal." He signaled a passing attendant, who instantly produced Marin's coat, as though it had been waiting. Rhett held it open for her. "It's late. Let me make sure you get out of here without your ex trying for a 3rd round. You're changing the subject again. I'm walking you to your car. Different thing." He guided her through the ballroom, and she noticed how the crowd seemed to open in front of him without anyone appearing to move. At the door, the 2 silent men stepped aside. The valet had her car, a modest gray sedan, already idling at the curb, though she was certain she'd left the ticket in her clutch and never handed it over. She stopped on the sidewalk, the cold night air sharp and clean after the warm room. "Rhett," she said, "who are you?" He opened her car door. For a moment he looked at her the way he had on the dance floor, like he saw more than she meant to show. "Someone who's glad you picked him tonight," he said. "Get home safe, Marin." The door closed, and as she pulled away, she saw him standing under the hotel lights, the two silent men already flanking him, the whole grand entrance rearranging itself quietly around one man. Maren woke on Sunday to a knock at her office door, which was strange, because it was Sunday and her office was closed. She had come in only to catch up on paperwork before the week buried her. She wasn't expecting anyone. But when she opened the door, a young woman in a crisp courier uniform stood there, holding a familiar canvas bag. "Delivery for Maren Cole," the woman said, checking a slip. "Signed off already. Have a good one." She was gone before Maren could ask a single question. The bag was hers. She recognized the coffee stain on the strap and the little enamel pin of a sunflower she'd fixed to the front pocket years ago. She'd left it at the Ashford last night, tucked under a table during all the chaos, and had spent the drive home groaning about the trip she'd have to make to fetch it. She unzipped it. Everything was inside: her spare charger, her planner, a granola bar gone soft, nothing missing. Tucked into the front pocket, where the sunflower pin was, sat a small folded card. Cream paper, heavy, expensive. "Thought you'd want this back before Monday." No number, no address, just the letter, written in clean, unhurried handwriting. Maren sat down slowly in her empty office and stared at the card. She had told him her first name. She had never told him where she worked. She had never mentioned the bag at all. She should have been unsettled. Part of her was, but a bigger part felt something warm and curious unfold in her chest, and that part won when she noticed the second line she'd missed on the back of the card. "If you'd like to say thank you in person, the coffee cart by the river opens at 9. I'll be there until 10. It was 9:20. She told herself she was going for answers. Not because a tall stranger with calm gray eyes had returned her bag before she'd even asked. Purely for answers. She grabbed her coat. The Chicago Riverwalk was quiet on a cold Sunday morning, the water gray and glassy, joggers puffing clouds of breath as they passed. She spotted Rhett easily. He was leaning against the rail near a small coffee cart, 2 cups already in his hands, watching a barge move slowly under the bridge. He wore a dark wool coat, no gloves, looking completely at ease in the cold. He turned before she reached him, as if he'd felt her coming. "You found the card," he said, and held out one of the cups. She took it, warming her fingers. "You found my office, and my bag, and apparently my whole morning schedule." "Only the coffee part of your schedule." He nodded to a bench facing the water. "Sit? I promise I'm less mysterious in daylight." That would be hard to prove, but she sat. The coffee was exactly how she liked it, a little too sweet, which she'd never once told him. "All right," she said. "How did you know where I work?" "I never mentioned it." "You had a lanyard in your bag, Meridian Events, with the address printed on the back." He sipped his coffee. "I didn't go through your things. It was sitting on top when the staff found it. I sent it to the address on the card." That was almost reasonable. Almost. "And the coffee? How I take it?" "Guess." "That's a very lucky guess. I pay attention. Last night you added 3 sugars to a glass of wine punch and drank it anyway, without complaining." I made an assumption. A faint smile. "I was fairly sure you had a sweet tooth you were too polite to admit." She laughed, caught off guard, and some of her guard came down with it. He wasn't watching her the way Gavin used to, measuring, waiting for a mistake. Rhett watched, like he found her genuinely interesting, and it had been a long time since anyone had looked at her that way. "Okay," she said. "Your turn. Last night half of Chicago bowed to you. The valet had my car running before I handed over a ticket. What is it you actually do?" He looked out at the water for a moment before answering. "I run businesses," he said. "Logistics, mostly. Moving things from where they are to where they need to be. Warehouses, shipping routes, freight. It sounds dull, and most of it is. He turned the cup in his hands. I also have interests in hospitality. A few hotels. The Ashford is one of them. Marin nearly choked on her coffee. You own the Ashford. A share of it. Enough that the staff know my face. That explained the nods, the coats, the running car. It explained Delphine's nerves. It was a clean answer, and it fit. And yet a small, quiet part of her noticed how carefully he'd laid it out, like a man setting down only the pieces he wanted her to see. That's a lot of businesses for someone who looks about my age, she said. I started young, I had help I didn't ask for, and responsibilities I didn't want. He said it lightly, but the words had edges. It's a long story, and not a very cheerful one. I've got until 10. He smiled, but he didn't take the opening. Another time. Tell me about you instead. Meridian Events. You plan corporate things? Conferences, galas, product launches, the unglamorous machinery behind glamorous nights. She shrugged. I'm good at it. I like fixing problems before anyone knows there was one. That's a rarer skill than people think, says the man who fixes them after everyone knows. He laughed at that. A real laugh, low and surprised, and she felt absurdly proud of pulling it out of him. They talked until the cart started packing up. He asked about her work, her friends, the party she'd helped plan, and he listened in a way that made her keep talking longer than she meant to. Every time she circled back to him, his family, where he grew up, why grown men went pale when he mentioned a building, he turned the question gently aside and set it down out of reach. By the time she stood to leave, she realized she'd told him half her life story and learned almost nothing certain about his. You did it again, she said. A whole hour, and I still don't really know you. You know I return bags, and remember how people take their coffee. He rose, tall against the gray river. That's more than most people get. She should have pushed. Instead, she found herself smiling. Thank you, Rhett. For last night. And this. Any time. He hesitated, then added, quieter. Marin, if you ever find something at one of your events that doesn't seem to belong to anyone, a file, a bag, papers left behind, don't hand it off before you check with me. Some things are safer left unclaimed. It was such an odd thing to say that she laughed. What kind of events do you think I run? The kind where careful people forget things on purpose, he said. And though he smiled, his eyes weren't smiling at all. Monday morning. Rhett's strange warning was the last thing on Marin's mind. She had a conference to run. The event was a mid-sized corporate summit at the Fairmount Center downtown. 300 guests, a keynote, 2 panels, and a lunch that had to go out hot and on time. Marin arrived at 7, clipboard in hand, and spent the first 2 hours doing what she did best, catching problems before they became disasters. A microphone that buzzed, a caterer who'd sent the wrong linens, a speaker stuck in traffic. She fixed each one and moved on. It was during the mid-morning lull, while she swept the back rooms to make sure nothing had been left behind, that she found it. The room was a small private lounge the client had booked for their executives. Leather chairs, a low table, a wet bar no one had touched. Tucked between the seat cushion and the arm of a chair in the far corner, half hidden, was a slim leather book. Dark green, worn soft at the corners, held shut with a thin elastic band. She almost left it for the client to claim, but it had slid so far down the cushion that whoever left it clearly hadn't meant to. If she didn't rescue it, the cleaning crew might toss it, so she pulled it free and turned it over in her hands. There was no name on the cover. She opened it, just to find one. Inside were columns, dates, numbers, short codes she didn't recognize, names of companies. Some she'd heard of, most she hadn't. Beside each entry sat a figure, and the figures were large, larger than made sense for the kind of firm renting a lounge for a Monday summit. One column was labeled only with initials. Another simply read cleared or pending down the line. She wasn't an accountant, but she'd handled enough client budgets to know when numbers didn't add up. These didn't. Money seemed to move in and out of the same handful of companies in circles, landing nowhere, explaining nothing. A few pages in, an entry had been crossed out hard enough to tear the paper, with a single word written above it in red: stop. A small cold feeling settled in her stomach. She closed the book. It was probably nothing, some private accounting she wasn't meant to understand. The right thing to do was hand it to the client's team lead, a brisk man named Harlan who'd been barking orders all morning, and let them sort it out. She was halfway across the main hall to find him when Rhett's voice reached her. "Marin," she turned. He was standing near the side entrance in a charcoal suit, looking as calm and out of place as a stone in a river of rushing conference-goers. She hadn't seen him come in. No one ever seemed to see him come in. "Rhett, what are you—" She glanced at the badge lanyards around her. "This is a closed event. How did you even get past the desk?" "I know the building manager." He crossed to her, and his eyes went straight to the green book in her hands. Something in his face shifted, a stillness sharpening into focus. "Where did you find that?" "In the executive lounge. Someone left it in a chair." She frowned. "Why? Do you?" "Don't hand it to anyone." He said it quietly, but with a weight that stopped her cold. "Not the client. Not your team. No one." Marin's grip tightened on the book. "It's just a ledger. Somebody's forgotten accounting. I was about to give it to the client's lead so they can—" "That's exactly who you can't give it to." He guided her gently by the elbow, away from the flow of people, into the quiet of a side corridor. "May I?" She hesitated, then handed it over. He opened it, scanned 2 pages, and closed it again fast, as though he'd read enough in 3 seconds to know the whole thing. "This isn't the client's," he said. "Or it is, on paper, but 3 other groups have been looking for a book that matches this one for the better part of a month." He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was something like worry in his eyes. Whoever left it here didn't forget it. They panicked and hid it, and they'll come back for it, or send someone who will. Marin's mouth had gone dry. "Rhett, you're scaring me. It's a notebook. It's a record of money that a lot of powerful people would very much like to disappear." He handed it back to her, which surprised her. "And it's safest, right now, in the hands of someone none of them would ever suspect. Someone with no stake in any of it. Someone like me." She laughed, but it came out thin. "This is a joke. Yesterday you told me to check with you before I hand off lost papers. You knew this would happen." "I didn't know. I hoped it wouldn't." He rubbed the back of his neck, and it was the first unpolished thing she'd ever seen him do. "The event listing for this summit crossed my desk last week. The client's name is one I've been watching. When I saw you were the planner, He stopped. "I came to make sure you didn't get caught in the middle of something. I was too late by 5 minutes." Across the hall, near the lounge she'd just left, 2 men in dark suits had appeared and were speaking to Harlan in low, urgent voices. One of them gestured sharply at the row of chairs. The other was already scanning the room, and his gaze swept toward the corridor where Marin stood. Rhett stepped smoothly between her and the hall, blocking their line of sight with his shoulders. "Put it in your bag," he said, low. "Zip your coat over the strap. Walk out the loading exit like you're checking on the catering. Don't run. Don't look back at them. And go where? Home. Lock your door. I'll call you within the hour. You don't have my number." The corner of his mouth twitched, the old calm flickering back for a second. "I'll manage." She should have argued. She should have marched over to Harlan and dumped the whole strange thing in his lap and washed her hands of it. But she'd seen the torn page and the word stop in red, and she'd watched 2 strangers demand answers with the flat, patient faces of men who were used to getting them. Every instinct she had trusted told her Rhett was not lying. She slid the ledger into her bag and zipped her coat. "Rhett," she whispered, "what happens now?" He glanced once toward the men, then back at her, and his voice was quiet and certain. "Now we find out who's really looking for it," he said. "Go. I'll be right behind you." She went, and as she pushed through the loading door into the cold gray daylight, clutching a stranger's book that men in suits were tearing a room apart to find, Maren understood that her ordinary life had just ended. The ledger sat in Maren's bag for 2 days, like a stone she couldn't put down. Rhett had called within the hour on Monday, exactly as he'd promised, from a number that showed up as blocked. He'd told her to keep the book close, tell no one, and carry on with her life as normally as she could, which was easy for him to say. Maren had a contract in New York she couldn't cancel. A rooftop networking reception for a hospitality group on Tuesday evening, and backing out would have raised more questions than going. "Then go," Rhett had said on the phone. "Do your job. I'll be in the city on Tuesday anyway. If anything feels wrong, you call me. On the blocked number I can't dial, I'll find you," he'd said, which was becoming his answer for everything. So she flew to New York, checked into a modest hotel, and told herself the whole thing was almost over. She'd hand the ledger to Rhett, he'd deal with it, and she'd go back to buzzing microphones and wrong linens. The reception was on the 40th floor of a glass tower in Manhattan, the kind of rooftop space where the whole city spread out below like a circuit board of light. Maren worked the room the way she always did, quiet and efficient, checking the bar, the servers, the timing of the passed plates. For an hour, everything felt normal. She almost relaxed. Then she noticed the 2 men who didn't belong. They weren't guests. They had the badges, but they weren't drinking, weren't networking, weren't doing any of the things people did at these events. They were working the room in a different way, stopping servers, murmuring questions, showing a photo on a phone. She watched one of them corner a young waiter and press him with a low, insistent voice until the boy shook his head and hurried off. She drifted closer, pretending to inspect a tray of glasses, and caught fragments. Green cover, about this size, left behind at a Chicago event Monday. Someone on the planning staff, we think. Her blood went cold. They were describing the ledger. They were describing her. She set the tray down carefully so her hands wouldn't shake, and moved toward the far end of the terrace, keeping her back to them, her mind racing. She recognized one of them now, not the man himself, but the type. He had the same flat, patient look as the men who'd torn apart the lounge in Chicago, and the second man wore a company pin she knew, Voss Harrington, a competitor to the firm whose summit she'd worked. 2 rival groups, both hunting the same book, both closing in. She needed to get to the service stairwell. She needed to disappear before either of them thought to ask the reception's own planner whether she'd found anything. "You look like a woman who needs air she can't get up here." Maren spun. Rhett was beside her, a glass of something untouched in his hand, dressed for the evening as if he'd been an invited guest the whole time. Relief hit her so hard her knees nearly gave. "They're here," she breathed. 2 of them. "They're asking the staff about a green book left at a Chicago event. They're asking about the planner. Rhett, they mean me. I know. I've been watching them since you arrived." He didn't look at the men. He looked at her, easy and unhurried, and put a light hand at her back, the same steady touch from the dance floor, and it grounded her the same way. "Smile. You're the planner. You're supposed to be talking to a guest. Right now, that's all this is." She made herself smile. It felt like cracking ice. "The one by the bar is Voss Harrington's man," Rhett went on, his voice low and pleasant, as if he were complimenting the view. "The other works for a group out of Detroit. They both think the other has the ledger. They came here hoping to shake it loose from the staff. Neither of them has connected it to you yet. A Chicago planner at a New York reception isn't an obvious link. Let's keep it that way. How do you keep it that way? I give them something else to look at. He set his glass on a passing tray. Do you trust me? It was a strange question to be asked 40 floors above Manhattan by a man she'd known 5 days. But she thought of the returned bag, the coffee, the way he'd stepped between her and the suits in Chicago without being asked. I shouldn't, she said. But yes. Then walk to the service door on my left, slowly, like you're going to check on the kitchen. Don't rush. I'll handle the rest. She started walking. Behind her, she heard Rhett's voice rise slightly, warm and public now, calling out a greeting. Voss. Didn't expect to see your people here. She glanced back once. Rhett had crossed straight to the Harrington man, hand extended, loud and friendly, in a way she'd never seen him be, and the sheer surprise of being addressed by name had frozen the man solid. Every eye near the bar turned toward the two of them. The Detroit man, seeing his rival suddenly the center of attention, drew closer to listen, forgetting the servers entirely. In 3 sentences, Rhett had gathered both hunters into one small knot of tension and turned the whole room's attention onto them, and away from the quiet woman slipping through the service door. The stairwell was cold and gray and blessedly empty. Marin descended 2 flights, heart pounding, before she stopped and pressed her back against the wall to breathe. The ledger sat heavy in her bag. She wrapped her arm around it. A minute later, the door above her opened and closed. Footsteps, unhurried. Then Rhett came around the landing, not even out of breath. You're clear, he said. They're too busy accusing each other now to think about the staff. It'll buy us the night. What did you say to them? I asked Harrington's man how his search was going. That's all. When a man thinks you already know what he's looking for, he stops looking and starts worrying about you instead. He nodded down the stairs. There's a car at the loading dock, not the front. Come on. She followed him down, and only when they reached the quiet of the concrete dock, the city roaring faintly beyond the walls, did she let herself ask the question sitting in her chest. You keep saying you run logistics and hotels, she said. But that up there wasn't a hotel man handling a problem. You knew both of them by name. You knew who they worked for, where they were from, what they were thinking before they did. She looked up at him. Who are you that men like that are afraid of you? Rhett held the car door open. The easy warmth had faded from his face, replaced by something quieter and more tired. Get in, he said gently. We'll talk over dinner tomorrow. Somewhere with a view of the water. He paused. You've earned the truth, Marin. All of it. I just need one more night to figure out how to tell it. The restaurant Rhett chose sat on the Brooklyn waterfront, low and quiet, with tall windows facing the East River and the lit towers of Manhattan glowing across the water. He'd taken a table in the far corner, away from everyone, where they could talk without being heard. Marin had spent the whole day rehearsing what she'd demand from him. Now, sitting across the small table with the river shining behind him, all her prepared questions collapsed into one. No more turning the subject, she said. Tonight, you tell me who you are, or I take that book to the nearest police station, and I'm done. Rhett nodded slowly, turning his water glass in a slow circle. For a long moment, he watched the ferries slide across the dark water. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. My father built something, he said, a long time ago. It started as real logistics. Trucks, warehouses, shipping, honest work. But the routes he controlled ran through places where honest work and other kinds of work sit close together. Over the years, the something he built stopped being a company and became more like a network. People came to it for protection, for arrangements, for problems that couldn't go through ordinary channels. He looked at her steadily. When he died, it came to me. I was 22. I didn't ask for it, and I didn't want it. But there were a few hundred families whose lives depended on it running well, and no one else to hold it together. So I took it. Maren sat very still. When you say a network, when you say arrangements, she swallowed. You're telling me you run something that operates outside the law. I'm telling you I run something that operates outside the ordinary rules of business, he said carefully. There's overlap. I won't pretend there isn't. But I've spent 8 years pulling it toward the light, cutting off the parts I couldn't stand, turning the rest into things that are simply large and quiet and careful. The people who greet me at hotels aren't afraid of me because I hurt anyone. They're careful because they know I remember everything, and I keep my word, and I have reach in rooms they can't enter. Maren's heart was pounding, but not with the fear she'd expected. She kept waiting for the part where he lied to her, softened it, spun it into something pretty. He didn't. The ledger, she said. What is it really? It's a record. One of those old, ugly parts left behind. A fraud scheme running through 3 companies, moving stolen money through fake accounts, and pinning the losses on ordinary employees who'll take the blame and lose everything. His jaw tightened. The men hunting it want it destroyed before it reaches anyone who could use it. I want it to reach the people who can clear the innocent ones. That's the whole fight. You picked up the one thing that ends it, purely by accident. And you. She studied his face. Which side are you really on? The men in the suits work for people. Do you work for people too? I work for the people who'd get crushed if that book disappeared. He leaned forward. Maren, I know how this sounds. A man like me telling you he's one of the good ones. I'm not asking you to believe I'm good. I'm asking you to notice that in 5 days, with every chance to lie to you, I haven't. Not once. When you asked what I do, I told you the true parts and stayed quiet on the rest. When I couldn't answer, I said so. That's the most honest I know how to be, while keeping you out of danger. She sat back, her mind spinning through every conversation they'd had, and she realized, with a strange jolt, that he was right. He had dodged, he had deflected, he had wrapped soft curtains around hard truths, but he had never once told her a thing that wasn't so. Not about the coffee, not about the hotel, not about the men, not about any of it. That's the thing that scares me most, she admitted. You've never lied to me. I keep waiting for it, and it never comes. Gavin lied to me every single day, and I got used to it. This is worse somehow, trusting someone I have every reason not to. Something in Rhett's face softened, an ache under the calm. I know. Why me? She asked. You could have taken that book from me in Chicago. You could have made it disappear, made me disappear from all of it, and I'd never have known. Why keep me in the middle of it? He was quiet for a long moment. Because you asked me to dance, he said finally. Do you know what that was like? I stand at the edge of every room I walk into. People greet me. They defer to me. They're careful with me. Nobody has reached for me for anything small or human in years. And then a woman I'd never met put her hand on my arm and whispered a favor. Because for 1 second, she needed a person, and I happened to be standing there. A faint smile. You saw a stranger you could lean on. Not a name, not a reach, not a reputation. Just a person. I'd forgotten anyone still could. Maren felt her throat tighten. Across the water the city glittered, indifferent and huge, and here, at this small table, a dangerous man was telling her the plainest truth he had. That's not a reason to drag me into a fraud investigation, she said, but her voice had gone soft. No, he agreed. The reason I didn't take the book and vanish is simpler. If I'd made it disappear my way, no innocent person gets cleared. The scheme just goes quiet and starts again somewhere else. To end it for good, the ledger has to reach the right hands through the front door, legally, cleanly, in a way no one can bury, and that means someone with clean hands has to carry it there. He met her eyes. That was going to be me. But the men hunting it know my face. They don't know yours. You picking it up changed the whole shape of this. It gave us a way to actually win. So I'm useful. You're in danger. And you're brave. And you're useful. And none of those cancel out the others. He reached across the table, slowly, and rested his hand near hers without taking it, leaving the choice to her. I'll get you out of this whenever you say the word. Tonight, if you want, you can walk away and I'll make sure no one ever connects you to that book. But if you stay, we finish it. And a lot of people who did nothing wrong get their lives back. Marin looked at his hand on the table, then at his face, the calm gray eyes that had never once deceived her. She didn't take his hand, not yet, but she didn't pull hers away either. Tell me where we go next, she said. The trail led to Boston. One of the crossed-out entries in the ledger listed a company with a registered office there, a shipping firm called Callaway Maritime that appeared again and again in the fraud columns. Rhett believed it was the seam that held the whole scheme together. If they could match the ledger's fake accounts to Callaway's real records, the evidence would be airtight, and the innocent employees taking the blame would be cleared for good. They drove up on Friday, and somewhere on the long gray highway between New York and Boston, Marin's certainty started to crack. She'd said she would see it through. She'd meant it in the warm glow of that Brooklyn restaurant, with the city shining and Rhett's honest eyes on her. But in the plain daylight, watching the miles roll by, the whole thing felt enormous and wrong-sized for her life. She was an events planner. She fixed buzzing microphones. She was not supposed to be carrying evidence against people who tore rooms apart looking for it. By the time they reached the hotel in Boston, the doubt had swelled into something she couldn't hide. I need to say something, she told him in the quiet of the lobby, before they went up. And I need you not to talk me out of it. Rhett went still. All right? I don't think I can do this. The words came out in a rush. I keep telling myself I'm brave, that I'll see it through, that the innocent people matter more than my nerves, and they do. But I lie awake, and all I can think about is that I have a life. A small, boring, ordinary life, with buzzing microphones and wrong linens, and a mother who calls me on Sundays, and I want it back. Her eyes stung. I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to survive one party. She braced for it, for the argument, for the gentle pressure, the reasons why she couldn't leave now, the reminder of the families depending on her, the careful case a man like him could surely build to keep her where he needed her. It never came. Rhett was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Marin blinked. Okay? You want out. You're out. He pulled out his phone. Give me the book. I'll have a car take you to the airport within the hour. You'll be home tonight. I'll route the ledger to the investigators myself. It's harder my way, and slower, and the men hunting it know my face, but I'll manage it, and no one will ever connect your name to any of this. You have my word. She stared at him. That's it? You're not going to… Going to what? Convince me. Tell me how much you need me, how I'm the only one who can do it, how the whole thing falls apart if I leave. She heard the edge in her own voice and couldn't stop it. Gavin used to do that. Every time I wanted something for myself, there was a reason it wasn't a good time, wasn't fair to him, wasn't the smart choice. He never once just let me have what I wanted. Rhett put the phone away. He looked at her for a long moment, and there was no calculation in his face at all, only a kind of steady patience. I'm not going to do that, he said, because it would be a lie, and I don't lie to you. Yes, it's easier with you. Yes, Your walking away makes my job harder and riskier. But harder for me is not the same as you owe me this. You picked up a book in a chair. You don't owe the whole world a rescue because of an accident." He shrugged, and it was the most human she'd ever seen him. "You're a person, Marin, not a piece of a plan. If I treated you like a piece of a plan the second it got hard, I'd be exactly the kind of man you're afraid I am." The lobby was quiet around them. Somewhere a bellhop wheeled a cart across the marble. Marin stood there with her heart doing something complicated in her chest. And she understood, all at once, what she'd actually been testing. She hadn't really been deciding whether to leave. She'd been waiting to see whether he'd let her. Gavin had never let her leave a single conversation without winning it. Every man she'd ever leaned on had, somewhere underneath, kept a hand on the door. And here was a man with more power than any of them. A man who could reroute cars and read rooms and make competitors go pale with a sentence. And the moment she said, "I want to go home," he simply opened the door and stepped back. "You'd really just let me leave," she said slowly, "even though it costs you. Your safety isn't the price I pay for your help. It's not a trade." He held out his hand for the ledger, palm up, no pressure in it. "So, airport or Callaway Maritime, either way you're safe." "That part's not on the table." Marin looked at his open hand. She thought about the small, ordinary life she wanted back. She thought about the employees somewhere out there whose names were being smeared, who'd lose their homes and their reputations for money they never touched. She thought about the fact that she was the one person in the world the hunters weren't looking for, and how that was an accident, and how accidents were sometimes the only door that opened at the right moment. And she thought about the man in front of her who had just handed her the exit without a single string attached, and how that, more than the danger, more than the truth about who he was, had settled something in her she hadn't known was unsettled. She didn't put the ledger in his hand. "I'm staying," she said. Rhett's brow lifted, just slightly. "Marin, not because you talked me into it. You didn't try. That's exactly why." She tightened her grip on the bag. "I've spent years being managed by someone who called it caring. I forgot what it feels like when someone actually leaves the choice to me. So I'm making it. I'm staying. We finish this. Together." For a moment, Rhett didn't say anything. Then, something crossed his face that she'd never seen there before. Not the calm, not the careful control, but a raw, quiet relief, quickly folded away. "All right," he said softly. "Then we finish it together." He lowered his hand. "But the second it stops being your choice, you tell me, and we stop. Deal?" "Deal," he almost smiled. "For the record, you're braver than you give yourself credit for." "For the record," she said, "I'm terrified." Those are usually the same thing. They stood a moment longer in the quiet lobby, and something had shifted between them, small and permanent. Not the danger drawing them close, not the secret they carried. Something simpler and far more solid. The plain fact that, for the first time, she had chosen him with her eyes open and nothing forcing her hand. Tomorrow they would take the ledger to Boston Harbor and try to end it. Tonight, she finally trusted him. Saturday morning came gray and bright over Boston Harbor, the water flat and cold, gulls wheeling over the piers. Rhett had spent the night making calls. By the time Marin came down, he had a plan, and it was simpler than she'd feared. "We're not sneaking anywhere," he told her over coffee. "No back doors, no shadows. That's how the men hunting this want us to play it. Quiet, hidden, easy to make disappear. So we do the opposite. We walk the ledger straight through the front door to people who can't be bought and can't be buried." The people, it turned out, were a team of fraud investigators, accountants and auditors working a case that had been open for months. They already knew a scheme was running through Callaway Maritime and 2 other firms. They already knew ordinary employees were being set up to take the fall for money that had vanished into fake accounts. What they'd never had was the one thing that tied it all together in a single hand: the ledger. They've had the pieces for months, Rhett said. They just couldn't prove the pieces belonged to the same puzzle. That book does it. Every fake account, every crossed-out entry, matched to a real transaction. It's a map. And they'll actually use it? Marin asked. They won't just make it go away like everyone else wants to. These ones can't. He almost smiled. That's the whole point of picking them. Once it's logged into an active case, it's part of the record. Nobody can unring that bell. Not Harrington, not the Detroit group, not anyone. The book stops being something people can fight over the moment it's officially in the file. They met the lead investigator, a sharp, tired woman named Ruth Ellery, in a plain office overlooking the harbor. Marin had braced for something dramatic. Instead, it was almost boringly ordinary. Forms, a signature, a witness, the ledger sealed into an evidence bag and labeled while a second auditor photographed each page. And Ruth turned the pages slowly, and Marin watched her expression shift from professional caution to something close to disbelief. "Do you have any idea what you're handing me?" Ruth said quietly. "We've had 4 employees suspended for months over the Callaway losses. Good people. One of them nearly lost his house. We knew they were clean. We couldn't prove where the money actually went." She tapped the torn page, the red stop. "This proves it. All of it." Marin felt something loosen in her chest that had been tight for a week. "So they'll be cleared." "They'll be cleared," Ruth said. "And the ones who set them up won't be." She looked up at Marin, then at Rhett, with the careful neutrality of someone who had a fair idea who Rhett was and had decided not to ask. "Where did you find it?" "In a chair," Marin said. "At a conference. Somebody hid it there and panicked." Ruth almost laughed. "The biggest break in a year. And it was in a chair." She shook her head. "Whoever left it there did us a favor without meaning to. And whoever brought it here," she glanced at Marin, "did a braver thing than they probably realize. It was done in under an hour. No chase, no confrontation, no drama. Just paper, signatures, and the quiet, unstoppable machinery of a case that could no longer be buried." Marin walked out of that plain office into the harbor light, feeling strangely weightless, as though she'd been carrying the book in her body and not her bag. "That's it?" she asked Rhett on the pier. "It's really over? For you?" "Yes." He looked out at the water. "The rest will take months. Audits, filings, the slow unwinding of it. But the part that put you in danger ended the second Ruth logged that bag. There's nothing left to hunt. The book's in the record. The men who wanted it gone lost the moment they couldn't reach it anymore." He turned to her. "You're free, Marin. Genuinely. It's finished." She let out a long breath she felt like she'd been holding since the ballroom. The last piece fell into place 2 days later, and it came from an unexpected direction. Marin was back in Chicago when her phone lit up with messages from friends. Gavin, it turned out, had spent the past week doing what Gavin did best: talking. Somewhere in his networking circles, he'd caught wind that Marin was tangled up in something shady with a dangerous man, a missing book, executives asking questions. He'd taken that thin thread and spun it into a story he told at every dinner and drink. That Marin had gotten herself mixed up in fraud, that she'd stolen something, that her sudden disappearing act that week proved she had something to hide. He'd told it to the right rooms and the wrong people. It had spread, and then the fraud case broke into the business press. The story that ran was clean and clear. A scheme uncovered at Callaway Maritime and 2 partner firms. Several wrongly accused employees fully cleared. The real culprits named. And in the reporting, in the small print of how the break had come, was a single line about an anonymous member of the public who had recovered and turned in the crucial evidence, described by one investigator as having done a genuinely brave and selfless thing. It didn't take long for the people Gavin had been talking to put it together. The woman he'd been painting as a criminal was, quietly, the one who'd handed over the evidence that cleared innocent people and exposed the guilty. The story he'd spun didn't just fall apart, it reversed on him completely. Marin heard about it secondhand, from Priya, over the phone. "He's been telling everyone you were dirty," Priya said, half laughing, half furious. "And now the whole circle knows you were the good one the entire time. Marin, people are actually embarrassed they listened to him. He's not getting invited to anything for a while." Marin sat on her couch, the winter light slanting through the window, and found that she didn't feel triumphant. She'd expected to. For a year, she'd imagined the sweet moment Gavin would finally be proven wrong in front of everyone whose opinion he cared about. Now that it had come, without her lifting a finger, it just felt quiet, small, like closing a door on a room she'd already left. "Are you gloating?" Priya asked. "Please gloat. You've earned it." "A little," Marin admitted. "Mostly I'm just glad it's over." That evening Rhett called, from a normal number this time, not a blocked one, which felt like its own small message. "You saw the news," he said. "I did. Gavin's version didn't age well." "No. Funny how the truth does that." A pause. "How are you, Marin?" "Really?" She looked out at the darkening city. A week ago she'd whispered a favor to a stranger to save her pride for one song. Now the pride, the danger, the ledger, the whole strange chapter had closed, and she was still standing, more herself than she'd been in years. "I'm good," she said, and meant it. "For the first time in a long time, I'm actually good. I'm glad." Another pause, and when he spoke again, there was something careful in it. "There's a charity gala in 2 weeks. I hear the planner is exceptional." Marin smiled. "You heard right." 2 weeks later, the Beaumont Hall in Chicago glowed with warm gold light, and every bit of it was Marin's doing. The charity gala was hers from the ground up, not a client's event she'd been hired to run, but one she had built herself, start to finish, for a foundation that helped families keep their homes through hard seasons. She'd pitched it, planned it, chased down the sponsors, argued over every candle and every seat. 300 guests, a silent auction, a dinner that went out hot and on time. For the first time in her career, when people looked around the room and said someone did a beautiful job here, the someone was her, and everyone knew it. She stood near the head of the room in a deep wine-colored dress, watching it all move like a machine she'd oiled with her own hands, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Not relief that nothing had gone wrong, pride that so much had gone right. The cause had a personal edge, too, though only a few people knew it. Part of the evening's proceeds went to a fund for workers wrongly accused of things they hadn't done, people who lost homes and reputations, while the truth caught up too slowly to help. Marin hadn't named it after anyone. She didn't need to. She knew exactly which 4 cleared employees in Boston had planted the idea in her chest. Red arrived quietly, the way he did everything. She spotted him near the entrance, tall in a dark suit, and her heart did the small, familiar thing it had started doing weeks ago. But tonight, there were no silent men flanking him, no hotel staff straightening their posture as he passed. He'd come alone, and he stood among the guests like one of them, a man at a party, nothing more. He crossed to her, and she noticed he'd let the room stay entirely hers. He didn't touch the flow of the evening, didn't summon anyone, didn't rearrange the space around himself the way he had at the Ashford. He simply took a glass from a passing tray and waited near the edge of things until she had a moment. "You made it," she said when she reached him. "I told you I would." He looked around the hall at the light and the crowd and the quiet hum of an evening running exactly as it should. "This is all you." "Every candle," I noticed. A faint smile. "The right call again," she laughed. It was strange and wonderful to see him here like this. Not the man everyone knew. Not the one who made competitors go pale. Just Rhett, watching her work with something like wonder. "You didn't fix anything tonight," she said. "You've just been standing here. There's nothing to fix. That's the point." He turned to face her fully. "The first time I saw you work a room, you were terrified and hiding it, and I stepped in and took over. Every time after that, you were in danger, and I was steering you out of it. I've never once just watched you be good at what you do, with nothing going wrong and no one after you." His voice softened. "I wanted to see it. It's better than I imagined." Maren felt her throat tighten in the good way. "You came as a guest." "I came as a guest," he agreed. "Not a rescuer. You don't need rescuing. You never really did. You needed one bad night to end, and then you handled everything else yourself." He tilted his head. "I just got to stand near you while you did." The evening wound down slowly, the way good evenings do. The auction closed. The last speeches were made. Guests began drifting toward coats and cars, and the staff started the quiet work of taking the room apart. Maren moved through it all, saying her goodbyes, and Rhett stayed at the edges, patient, letting her have every last piece of her own night. When the hall had mostly emptied, when the string quartet in the corner was packing up their instruments, he finally came to stand beside her, near the center of the floor. The gold light had dimmed to something soft and low. Only a few people remained, and none of them were watching. That was the thing Maren noticed most. The first time, in the Ashford ballroom, she had asked a stranger to dance because a whole room was watching, because Gavin was watching, because her pride hung on being seen. She'd needed the eyes on her to make it mean something. Now the eyes were gone. Gavin was somewhere across the city, uninvited, forgotten. The crowd had thinned to nearly nothing. There was no one left to perform for, no one to impress, no story that needed telling to anyone. And that was exactly when Rhett turned to her and quietly held out his hand. "Would you like to dance with me this time?" he said, "even if nobody's watching." Maren looked at his open hand, the same steady hand she'd grabbed in a panic weeks ago to save herself from one bad night, the hand that had returned her bag and read 100 rooms, and, in a Boston lobby, held out an exit with no strings on it. She thought about the woman who'd whispered that first favor. That woman had needed a stranger to lean on. She'd needed to be seen leaning, so it would count. The woman standing here didn't need any of that. She wasn't reaching for rescue. She wasn't performing for a room. She wasn't proving anything to an ex who no longer mattered. There was no one watching, nothing to escape, no plan to serve. Just a man she'd chosen with her eyes open, asking a simple question in an empty hall. "Yes," she said, and put her hand in his. "I would." The quartet, half packed up, saw them and quietly took their instruments out again. One of the violinists smiled and began to play, something slow and warm, just for the two of them. Rhett drew her in, one hand settling at the small of her back, the same steady touch as that first night. But everything else was different. That first dance she'd spent watching Gavin over Rhett's shoulder, checking whether it was working. This time, she didn't look anywhere but at him. "You're not holding your breath," he murmured. "No," she said, "I'm not." They turned slowly under the low gold light, the empty hall wide and quiet around them, the city dark and glittering beyond the tall windows. Somewhere out there were harbors and ledgers and men who ran networks, and men who spun rumors, and none of it reached this small circle of two people, moving to a borrowed song. She thought about how it had started, a whispered lie to save her pride. Could you dance with me? My ex is watching. And how it had ended, a true question in an empty room, even if nobody's watching. The whole distance between those two dances was the distance she'd traveled. From needing to be seen to simply being chosen. From leaning on a stranger to standing beside someone she trusted, freely, with nothing forcing her hand. "Rhett," she said quietly, her head near his shoulder. For the record, I'm not terrified anymore." She felt him smile against her hair. "For the record," he said, "neither am I." And in the quiet gold light, with no one watching and nothing left to prove, they danced. Two people who had chosen each other not for the appearance of it, but for the plain, hard-won truth.